Jason, one thing that I noticed is that when we build plans for folks, we almost always have an estate planning task.
Like almost always. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, you're right. And the task typically is to create or update some very outdated documents.
Yeah, or create them in the first place because they just kind of get put off and they land on the back burner and other important things come up. And sometimes it's year after year that we're recommending create your documents, or you haven't updated your documents in 5 or 10 or even many years beyond that. So it's time to get these updated. And the same thing can happen there too.
Yeah. And you see like the idea, right? The idea of having to go and have a conversation with someone about your demise, and then what happens to your stuff, and then what happens to the survivors, and like, what do they, and it's just all of these emotions, right? It's a very difficult subject to work on. And so it's understandable at the same time, like as someone who's been doing this for, well over 20 years, like I've seen this so much, but I also understand why. I get it.
Yeah, I get it too. Obviously haven't been doing this quite as long as you have, but I feel like maybe we can demystify some of the estate document creation and updating by going through how you might create those docs or update them or what you want to look for. And that's what we're going to get into on today's episode of Money and Taxes from BB to XYZ, where we break down a single money topic and explain how it could affect those across the generations. I'm Regina Neenan, certified financial planner and accredited behavioral finance professional.
And I'm Jason Speciner, certified financial planner and enrolled agent. And as we start into an episode where we will get into some areas of law, one thing to very importantly put out here is we are not lawyers. This is not legal advice. You need to speak with a lawyer. You need to get legal advice from a competent attorney in the state where you live and where your estate would be probated, if it were, right? Before doing anything related to your estate documents. Now, with that said, there are a number of sort of barriers to entry here, right? That being one. Go talk to an attorney. You got to go set up a time with an attorney. You got to go have this big old conversation, right? And that can make things hard, right?
And then there's, of course, the financial aspect. Attorneys are well-educated professionals with a wealth of experience, and that doesn't come cheap. But there is a good reason why when we make those recommendations in our financial plans, the first option that we recommend to just about everyone is to speak with a local professional, speak with a lawyer, go to the attorney, get legal advice from a legal professional. And we try to list a couple of local options so that folks have a direction. They can go and interview a few different attorneys to see who might be a good personality fit, someone who they want to work with to make or update those documents and then check in with to make sure everything is still as it should be on an annual or at least a couple every year's basis.
And you would think it sounds like an intimidating process, and it certainly is, right? But bear in mind that attorneys that do this all the time, right? Attorneys that are dealing with estate and probate and these situations where we are talking about the settling of property and all of that, they're used to it, right? This is part of their bread and butter. This is what they do. And so making it easier on you as the client is, of course, a part of that, right? They can help guide you down to some of the minutia that you may not necessarily think about, but they're making it easy because they're getting those details sort of, throughout their process. And so it can really help to have that conversation and just go into it with that open mind.
Yeah, I feel like when people meet us for the first time, that can be a little intimidating too. Like finances aren't an easy thing to talk about. But we tend to get along with the people who we work with pretty well. And I think it would be rather similar working with an attorney to build your estate plan. You're sharing some of your most intimate thoughts and feelings and wishes with them, desires for when you're not around anymore to take care of family or friends or charities that you care about. So it's actually a really nice opportunity to build that relationship.
Now, creating an estate plan, like doing that part of it, like it is very transactional, right? I mean, you're going to come to a conclusion, right? You're going to be done with the estate plan, and it's sort of like in stone, it's in writing. It's literally like notarized in writing documents that are as close to in stone as you're going to get, right? So
Yeah.
there is that aspect of it. It's a short-term engagement for sure. But then sort of beyond that, and this is definitely a topic for another episode, but managing that estate plan, like making sure that it's still doing the right things, like all of those pieces, that's where financial planning comes back into the fold, right? Once you've already gotten these documents, that's where us as financial planners then, of course, can step in and help make sure that that actually happens.
Yeah, and that's why we offer the opportunity to meet with your estate planning attorney with you,
Mhm.
whether that's as moral support or to help make sure that every piece of your financial life is covered there. Then also to make sure that we're helping you name your beneficiaries properly on the accounts we manage for you to make sure that those align well with your estate plan so that everything is in place and can run smoothly.
Yeah, little pro tip there. Usually when you get a full set of estate documents from an attorney, they will give you a document that will say this is exactly how you should be updating your beneficiaries. Here's, what they should look like, etc. That document, of course, is incredibly handy. But if you need guidance for, hey, I have, A, B, and C thing, and not sure how to align my beneficiaries with that, that is, again, another opportunity for us to help you see through all the kind of the forest through the trees, if you will, and what actually needs to show up on those forms to make sure that happens.
We talked about some of the intimidation aspects, working with this person, paying this person. What if you don't have any estate documents or haven't updated them in so long and you need something? Maybe you're not quite ready to pay that high price tag. Maybe you just want to
Right.
get some updates in there, get something in place, just so that you're not left with nothing or left with super outdated docs.
Yeah. And in this case, like, and again, this is very circumstantial. It just sort of depends on um, who is needing this and why, right? But in a lot of cases, if you have super outdated documents, it's naming people that don't, they're no longer alive, for example, as your like executor or personal representative, the person who's responsible for carrying out your wishes, right? If they're not even around, right? Like there's so many potential things where old documents, as well as just not having any documents at all, right? Having something that is current and updated and useful because it names people that are still alive and all of those things, like that is better than nothing at all, right? That doing that, right? Taking that step. So to accomplish that, Reggie, right? Tell our listeners what they can do to actually pull something like that off.
Yeah, so there's a number of kind of self-guided online tools to help you get something in place.
Right.
In general, again, not legal advice, but you're probably going to want to get those notarized.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And then we also have a kind of self-guided similar tool that we walk through,
Yeah.
again, not in the place of an attorney, but an attorney-guided software similar to the
Yeah.
others that you'd find online, just to help you get something in place. These are great starting points, like Jason mentioned, just to have something that's updated or something in place. But they're also documents that maybe a year, 2 or 3 years from now, you can take those to an actual attorney to give them a basis of what you have updated about what you want to do going forward so that they can make little tweaks and changes to just really help get things in an even better place for you.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm sure an attorney would appreciate if you showed up with a, hey, this is what I've, put into place at least to get something down, get my wishes, sort of known and make sure that if something did happen, sort of like almost, in case of emergency sort of documents. And then you bring those. It's okay. Like, but let's make sure these, we get all the T's crossed, I's dotted, etc. It just makes the conversation that much more productive if you do need to, right, increase the scope of your estate planning. There are some scenarios where you just won't need to, right? Maybe you
Yeah.
don't have kids. Maybe you have an only child, as an example, who's the only heir and the only for eight. And so it's really straightforward estate planning, like very easy. And that may be a case where an attorney-led online process is ultimately all you need.
Yeah. And let's take a step back here. Like when we're talking about an estate plan or estate documents, let's break down some of what those documents are and then what kind of accentuates an estate plan.
Yeah, and I think we did go through a handful of these, but just to sort of recap, right? The headline document that everyone thinks of when they think of their estate documents is their last will and testament, right? That's the thing that basically says like, here's what I want to happen to my property. It's your demands, right? And I remember sitting through this during estate planning for the CFP curriculum, and it was like If a will must be demanding. It doesn't ask, it tells, what needs to happen. And so I always thought that was kind of a cool aspect of a will.
Yeah, and then there are some other very important documents. One is your financial power of attorney. It allows someone else to make financial decisions for you if you are unable to do so while you're still alive.
Yeah. And that's super important. And to be very frank, like having that just for some of the most like unexpected needs, but that could pop up is really important, right? I mean, it's useful. You could find yourself leveraging a financial power of attorney even in a scenario where you're not incapacitated. You're just unavailable. You're just not able to do something. But hey, here's my power of attorney. You can do it for me.
Yeah, and similarly, a healthcare power of attorney, again, allowing someone to make healthcare decisions for you when you are not able to.
Yeah. And that one goes without saying, like, anything can happen at any moment that could leave you in a scenario where you're not well enough to make your own medical decisions. And you want a trusted person there to help you with that and to be the person who can make those decisions after, of course, knowing sort of what your wishes are, which you can, of course, also record in something called a living will, which explains all the different treatment things, right? And how you want to be cared for if you're in a terminal illness or sort of comatose state.
Yeah, one of the things I love about that, it acts as a guide for the person who you've named so that they
Yeah.
don't have to guess, what would this person want? What would you want? They have those instructions to help guide them to understand, here is what you want.
And of course, and this is again, check with your attorneys, do all the things that dependent on what the documents say. One may overrule the other. The POA
Yeah.
may overrule the living will. The living will may overrule the POA, but at least we're talking about informed decision making here for the POA. They know what's in your living will. If they have the right to override it, at least they know what you wanted. And that's the most important part.
And a lot of people I feel like come to us and they're like, "Hey Jason, hey Reggie, should I have a trust?" And
Mm-hmm.
we're not
Yeah.
we're not legal professionals. We can't really say like, "Yes, you should," or "No, you don't need one."
Yeah. And here's why, right? Because there's so many different nuances to what you would even use a trust for, right? There's like
Mhm.
100,000 different little things that you could potentially do it. Now, when you
And what
think about
type
it
of a
for
trust?
yeah, right. Like what type, why, like so much. Anyway, when you think about it for estate planning specifically, oftentimes the reason you would consider doing a trust was to avoid probate, right? Probate being the process that basically is court supervised, and a judge sort of approves all the different things that are happening within your estate so that the property is distributed in a certain way. It's public, right? It's a part of the public record. So having a trust is something that takes it out of the public view. It allows the administration to happen without the supervision of a judge, right? All these different little nuances. But depending on where you live, right, you may not need to do something as elaborate as a trust because it just simply isn't saving you any hassle or time. And again, that's in typically probate-friendly states like Colorado is one example where the process is not nearly as burdensome as somewhere like, say, California.
Yeah, and that's kind of the dividing line for me when people start asking really detailed questions about a trust. That's when it's, maybe you should go in and speak with a legal professional to see what your best route would be there.
Yeah, exactly. Like figure out what the details are from a legal perspective, not necessarily only a financial one. This question bleeds into all sorts of different spots. Even like LLCs get the same thing. Like, what's the legal perspective on having that limited liability? What's the legal perspective on having that trust? Because not everything is necessarily always going to tie back to the finances of that decision.
To round things out here with another important piece of an estate plan, not only do we want to make sure that your accounts are titled appropriately according to your estate plan, your will in particular, we also want to make sure that the beneficiaries are appropriate because they supersede your will. So even if you have something different stated in your will, beneficiaries differ. It's going to go with the beneficiaries, not with the will.
Yeah. That's an important distinction. When you name beneficiaries on an account, it's something I remember also from CFP coursework. They called it an order of contract. It's basically you're making an agreement with the bank or the brokerage of like, here's what I want to happen to my property after I pass away. Yeah, like you've said, like that happens first. And then if there's anything left to settle, that's the whole point of probate, is to figure out what happens to all the stuff that there wasn't necessarily like a clear contract with where those dollars or where that account goes.
Well, with that, let's get into today's takeaways, and I'll lead us in with takeaway number 1. The main estate planning documents that you are going to create when it comes time to build or update your estate plan are your will or your last will and testament, your healthcare power of attorney along with your living will, and your general durable power of attorney or financial power of attorney.
And takeaway number 2, having those documents that are created and in place with people intentionally named within them is much, much better than having nothing at all for your estate planning. So even if it's just taking that first step to get to an online portal or an attorney-led process on an online portal, whatever the case is, start there. If the meeting with the attorney and all these other big steps seem like too much, start there, because that will absolutely leave you in a better off spot than doing nothing.
And takeaway number 3, don't forget about your beneficiaries.
Yes, well, that's the whole point of what we're doing here, planning for those beneficiaries. If you have an idea, a question about estate planning, or anything else that you'd like to let us know about, you can reach us via email at podcast@fpfoco.com and on social media, which you can find all of those handles in our show notes.
Now, we work with folks all across the U.S., so if you have worked with an attorney who you've really enjoyed that experience with, reach out and let us know about them too.
That is a great point. We'd love to learn about that. Well, hey, thanks for listening, and we will talk to you soon.
Jason Speciner and Regina Neenan are investment advisor representatives of FPFoCo, a registered investment advisor. The information in this podcast is provided for general educational and entertainment purposes only. It may not apply to you or your specific circumstances and should not be considered financial, investment, or tax advice.